Greetings and welcome to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to head through the mists today? We're going to be crossing into the domains of dread. Into the domains of Ravenloft. Yes, once again we dive into Ravenloft to learn about another Darklord. And this one's an interesting one because there's two stories. Similar, but yet different. So, take it as you will which story you use in yours. One from old, one from new. They are very similar. We are going to be diving into Har'Akir, learning about the Darklord, Anhktepot. Let's plane shift. Take my hand, your guide today. Can't narrative. Remember to give me a tip, like, subscribe, and the bell, as we plane shift to Har'Akir. Now, if you were to learn about Har'Akir, and particularly about Anhktepot, where would we go? From 2nd edition, there are three sources I can suggest to you. The Darklords book from Ravenloft, Domains of Dread, and of course, Touch of Death, a adventure that deals with Anhktepot. If you want to look for 5th edition, he does have an upgraded lore in Van Richten's Guide, so there is going to be a combination of this. Now, it is important to note, before I do move on, that I will be going over both versions of the lore here. An interesting thing of what his story is in two ways, to give you an idea. And in much ways, his powers are very similar between the two, and there are some similarities that are left over. And they are, in a way, the same character, but there's these little idiosyncrasies that make things different. Perhaps it's the separation out from stuff from 2nd edition, perhaps it was just there were aspects of his story that were a little too much. I don't know. You decide. As we look at it. Now, when we talk about the 2nd edition version of him, Har'Akir just was a former shadow of its once glorious place, a village of maybe 300 souls living, a small patch of burning desert, rolling dunes, oases. Anhktepot was a priest of Ra, who was obsessed with immortality. Not for noble purposes, but to continue ruling his land. Feared death. He experimented on living subjects to extend his life. But he didn't have intelligence and patience for arcane studies. And his god would, of course, not agree with this. So, very few were as talented as needed to be to dive into this kind. And being lazy and impatient, he did the turn to his god. Loosely. Because something answered his call. A dark power. But regardless, his deed, Ra, punished him for his crimes. He did gain immortality, but he didn't understand what that meant. He ended up killing his family and servants simply by touching them. Touch of death. You'd think he'd learn after the first couple of people died. But he kept doing it. When his wife returned as a shuffling corpse, he realized what had become of him. It wasn't just dying, they would come back. Kind of a terrible thing to a degree, you know? So he began to raise his undead servants. But he did continue needlessly killing as many as he needed to have fresh corpses for him to utilize. He didn't want to be wasteful, and he was not discreet about this. So there was an uprising by loyal priests of Ra, and he was basically mummified, alive. So he still has some priestly abilities, an undead cleric, greater mummy, able to control lesser undead, who wanted eternal use, a vast empire, and now just a bandaged corpse over a small hamlet of what's left of his place in the domains of dread now that it's been drawn. Now, well. His domain is certainly larger in 5e, when we turn to that. We're turning to 5e. And this is actually, I like this picture a lot cooler. They made him look a lot cooler, I'm not going to lie, and kind of changed away his story. his domain is larger, his people are larger, but his story now shifts in a way that still has some similarities, but is much less, I guess, familial murdering. It still involves murder. So, he supposedly comes from a place called the Land of Weeds and Lotuses. He served 3 generations of pharaohs as a high priest. So, rather than being a priest that's in charge now, he's a high priest of a pharaoh. When the second pharaoh died, her unworthy son ascended to the throne. And this new pharaoh became unpopular. Anhktepot believed that he could remedy this, that the gods wanted him to take the pharaoh's place, that the pharaoh should be one of knowledge and deity's blessings. So when there was going to be a ritual to consecrate the new pharaoh, the third pharaoh, in their connection to gods, he and his loyal princes murdered him. Yeah, the people didn't take kindly to this. They rose up and executed the traitorous priests. Moreover, Anhktepot misjudged what his gods believed. As it came to them before death, they basically forsook him, cursing him and denying him entry to afterlife. They returned him to the world and stripped away a piece of his soul, his Ka, a vital essence that inspires all living beings. He reawakened trapped and paralyzed in his corpse, as he was mummified along with his followers. He felt the pain of every cut, every organ removed, as if he was alive. And he suffered and starved for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, basically, on the day of the last memory of his name faded from his homeland, a voice intruded into his mind, asking him if he still felt worthy to rule. His arrogance hadn't waned, and he swore with certainty he was. And he was granted freedom by the Dark Powers. He emerged from his crypt in his domain now, Har'Akir. He found a pious people devoted to the same gods he once served. He wiped out that religion, replacing it with his new gods of his own imagination, false divinities for whom he alone spoke. He used blasphemous rites to resurrect priests that were once buried alongside his powerful mummies, placing the heads of those beasts of holy with his new faith. They served him as they did in life. And his dead forces conquered Har'Akir. He has known treachery and conquest. He has known divinity and rule. But he also knows boredom and despair. He desires to recover his lost Ka, which he knows remains somewhere within his domain. And with it, he will become mortal again, die, and face his original god's judgment once more. Whether this means peace or oblivion means meaningless to him, he just seeks an end. So he has his dark mummy lord servants, his godhood, various priests under there, and he can control the borders with sandstorms. And yes, he basically can't die. He's tormented by that. He remembers every one of his crimes, understands that ambitions have stained his corporeal form for untold lifetimes, and he just wants his Ka to basically help him permanently go away and die, face his gods, return again. Yeah. Basically, his people, the Har'Akir people, once worshipped the deities of the Egyptian pantheon. And Anhktepot once was a servant of it. Hey, a servant of Ra. Turns out kind of the same, even though that it's Satan in the book here. It is technically the same. But he has replaced them with new gods. I mean, that... And the Dark Powers have granted his false gods some power, too. But it is an interesting fact that, you know, with this entire replacement of gods, he wants to go meet his gods. I think that'll piss him off even more. I just don't know. He's got bad plans. This man does not have good plans. I think that's about the best we can say about Anhktepot. Yeah. Pretty simple, isn't it? It is a very simple story. But I think it's an interesting story to tell because he is divided. And yes, he has more probable, I would say, look for the word for it, drive in 5th edition. And I think that's an important difference between these two editions. The level of drive. Second edition, he just basically gave in to dark powers, seeking immortality, ended up just murdering and raising people as undead, got killed by a bunch of followers, and then ended up here with his Domain of Dread form. This is, in a way, similar for arriving there. It's kind of a weird thing. He arrived in death, in a way. But perhaps he's less selfish? It's interesting because his crimes aren't as large as the second edition form, but he's punished all the same. It's perhaps more tragic in 5. I think that's a great way of saying it. In 2e, he was a man who sought immortality, did horrible things, and ended up murdering so many people in the name of power and because he could. And it led to his downfall into a mummy, his ultimate kind of destruction, turning into a Darklord, turning into this being that ruled over Har'Akir. In 5th edition, he merely thought he was better, and that it was the will of his gods, and that what path his people were taking under this pharaoh was the wrong one. Was it necessarily noble? No, but it's not the same kind of crime. Killing a pharaoh, thinking that that being was a mistake, and raised the throne, and that he perhaps, with the will of the gods, was best, is a lot different. Still, crime it nonetheless was, and it was punished just the same. It's just the twisted power of the dark powers seems more cruel in this case. It's interesting to see when part of me would think the changes would be because of the horrors and the murder of family and stuff from second edition. Instead, it's just the more I talk about it, the more I think about it, more cruel. Very interesting. We'll leave it there. A little food for thought about Anhktepot. Certainly speaking, not a good character. Never really a good character. Deserving of his punishment? I don't think so. Not the same way as some others. Some of these other Darklords have done so much worse than him. So much worse. He really just wants to die. It's just a thing that most of the others don't. Just some thought food. Anyway, if you want to check out more videos like this, I will do more Darklords in the future. Little videos like this to talk about them. You can always check out my schedule when I'm either going to be putting stuff up on my YouTube channel or going live on Twitch. That schedule will be up on my social medias, where you can also check out other updates. That's my Discord, my Twitter/X, my Blue Sky, and I do put it up on the information, kind of the discussion page of my YouTube. If you're over on my social medias, though, on those other first 3, you can see updates, schedule updates, what's going on with me, and of course cat pics. I will share my cat pics. My kitties are very cute. Other things that I can shout out is, if you want to check out more tabletop stuff, I do have Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6, where I talk about news of the week, deeper discussions in the tabletop world, things like running games, stuff to help being a player, a GM, all that kind of stuff, advice stuff, and news. And I do have live plays. If you haven't checked any of them out, you can go check them out. As time of this video, I have none going. There will become new comes in the future. You can go check out the older ones. Queen just finished up. Yeah, I think that's everything shot. I'm very bad at remembering everything shot. I think I shot it everything. And remember to do that stuff like I said at the beginning, like subscribing and if you're over on the YouTube side. My question for today, I didn't have a question for today for some YouTube basis. What do you think about this? What do you think about Anhktepot? What is your opinion on it? Because I would like to have a discussion on this Darklord, as it is such an interesting, tragic figure in comparison to some of the other Darklords I've talked about so far. And maybe I'll find more that are similar to Anhktepot. I might. And again, it's sort of like, there are crimes, but is the fate he has been beholden worthy of what he did? That's a question I have. Or were his gods too petty in this case? And the dark powers too cool? Very interesting. Anyway, I'm going to get going. Until the next time we chat about anything, I bid all of you out there adieu and farewell.